There is a house on Elm Street in Cincinnati that was built in 1947. It has survived 17 winters, 4 different owners, 2 recessions, and a tornado that destroyed every new home on the block. It is still standing, perfectly. Now ask yourself, when was the last time you heard someone say that about a house built last year? In the next 8 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly why homes built before 1960 were fundamentally different from anything being constructed today. Not just aesthetically, not just visually, structurally, materially. In every single decision that a builder made. From the foundation all the way up to the roof. And by the end, you'll understand why so many of those homes are still here. While houses built just 30 years ago are already falling apart, this isn't nostalgia, this is engineering. On This is Craftsmanship, and this is the truth that the modern construction industry doesn't want you thinking about too carefully. If this is already the kind of thing you think about, hit that subscribe button right now. We cover this world every single week. The first reason is the wood. When American builders constructed homes before 1960, they used what's called old-growth lumber. These were trees that had been growing for anywhere between 100 and 500 years. Slow-grown. Dense. With an incredibly tight grain that you can actually see when you look closely at the wood. You can feel it in the floors. You can see it in the beams. And you can absolutely measure it. Old-growth wood is significantly harder, more resistant to warping, and far more resistant to moisture than anything you will find at a lumber yard today. What are builders using now? Fast-grown pine. Trees harvested in 15 to 20 years. The wood is pale, soft, loose-grained. It warps. It breathes. It lets moisture in. And that moisture, over 20, 30, 40 years, becomes rot, becomes mold, becomes structural failure that starts inside the walls where nobody can see it until it's far too late. The men who built your grandfather's house didn't think about cutting corners on lumber because they weren't building to a price point. They were building to a standard, and that standard is almost entirely gone now. The second reason is the walls. Run your hand across the wall of a home built in 1952. Then run your hand across the wall of a home built in 2005. The difference is immediate. One feels solid, almost like stone. The other feels hollow, thin, because in many ways, it is. Before drywall became the industry standard in the late 1950s, American homes were built with plaster walls. 3 coats of plaster applied by hand over a wooden or metal lath. The entire process took skilled craftsmen days, sometimes a full week, per room. The result was a wall that was nearly 2 inches thick, fire-resistant, sound-resistant. Structurally rigid in a way that drywall cannot replicate. Plaster walls could hold weight. They absorbed impact. They regulated humidity inside the home naturally. And they didn't crack unless the house itself shifted dramatically. Modern drywall is gypsum board, half an inch thick. It dents from a hard knock. It cracks from minor settling. And when a single pipe leaks inside the wall, moisture soaks straight into that gypsum, and black mold begins growing in the dark where your family breathes. There are plaster walls in American homes today that are over 100 years old and still perfectly smooth. Not a crack, not a seam, not a patch. When was the last time anyone said that about drywall? If you're finding this valuable, a like on this video takes 2 seconds and it means more than you'd think. It helps this kind of content reach the people who actually care about it. The third reason goes all the way down to the ground. Pre-1960 American homes were built predominantly on full masonry foundations. Poured concrete or stacked stone. Thick, heavy. Engineered not for decades, but for centuries. Above that foundation, construction continued with full brick or double brick exterior walls. Not a brick veneer glued over a wood frame like you see today. Actual structural brick that carried the full load of the house. Brick doesn't rot. Brick doesn't burn easily. Brick doesn't warp or shift with temperature the way engineered lumber does. A brick wall built in 1928 will still be standing in 2128. And the brick itself will look almost identical to how it looked on the day it was laid. Now compare that to modern stick frame construction, thin wood studs, oriented strand board sheathing, which is essentially compressed sawdust and glue, and on the outside a thin layer of vinyl or engineered cladding that looks fine for about 15 years. When that cladding fails, and it always fails, moisture gets into the OSB underneath, and the wall begins to decompose from the inside out while everything looks perfectly normal from the street. The builders of 1950 weren't smarter than builders today. They simply weren't allowed to build badly. Unions, local inspectors, community reputation. A contractor who built a bad house in 1952 lost his business in that entire county within a year. Everyone knew who built every house on the street. Today, the builder is 3 holding companies removed from the actual construction. Nobody knows who built your house, and nobody is coming back to fix it. And then there is the detail work. Walk through any American home built before 1960 and look at the trim, the baseboards, the crown molding, the door casings, the built-in bookshelves, the window surrounds. These were not stamped out of a factory, but these were cut and fitted by carpenters who had served full apprenticeships. Men who had been working with wood for 15 or 20 years before they ever touched your house. The joints are tight. The profiles are deep. The proportions are deliberate. Because those craftsmen had studied their trade and understood that the relationship between a baseboard and a ceiling height wasn't arbitrary. It was considered. It created rooms that felt right in a way most people can sense immediately but can't quite explain. Today's trim is MDF, medium density fiberboard, pressed wood fiber and resin painted white and nailed up in an afternoon. It swells when it gets wet. It chips at the corners within a few years. It has no depth, no profile, no real character. And it will not survive a renovation 20 years from now. It will simply crumble when you try to remove it. But more than the material, it has no intention behind it. Nobody who installed modern trim was thinking about how it would look in 50 years. The craftsmen of 1950 were thinking about exactly that, and permanence is precisely what they achieved. There is something that happens when you stand inside a home built before 1960. You feel it before you can name it. A solidity, a quiet. The way sound moves differently through plaster walls. The way the floor doesn't flex beneath your feet. The way light comes through a double-hung window and falls across a hardwood floor that has seen 60 years of family life and is somehow more beautiful for it. These homes weren't just built, they were made by men who understood their trade, who took pride in work that would outlast them, who knew that a house is not a product. It is a shelter. It is where a family lives through every important moment of their entire life. Somewhere in America right now, there are homes that have been standing for over 100 years. They have outlasted the men who built them, the families who raised children in them, and every modern trend that tried to replace them. They will still be standing when everything being built this decade is already gone. That is not luck. That is what it looks like when people build something with the intention that it should last. And maybe, just maybe, it is worth remembering what that standard felt like. Well, if you've ever walked through an older American home and felt something that modern houses simply don't give you, you weren't imagining it. That feeling has a reason, and now you know exactly what it is. If this resonated with you, subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. And if you know someone who loves older homes the way we do, send this to them. They'll thank you for it.